Greetings. Greetings. Tony Mobley here. Welcome to Conversation with Tony Mobley. We are having an educational panel conversation today, and I have three lovely ladies to share this conversation with me. This is episode 1 of 2025 of Conversations with Tony Mobley, and we're back with new conversations. We want to thank everyone for being a part of the journey, this new journey powered by Mimo Live. And I want to let you know this is our first conversation with Mimo Live using a panel conversation. So we ask that you tune in. We want to thank the team behind Conversation with Tony Mobley for all of your hard work. You can watch Conversation with Tony Mobley on our website, conversationswithTonyMobley.com. And you can register for our Mukana question and answer system. In that system, you can ask a question and you can vote it up and down. Also, you can go to our website, again, conversationwithtonymobley.com. And we are here and we're going to get started with this conversation right now. And so, first, we're going to go to our lovely ladies and we're going to say, ladies, thank you so much for being here. I want to give each and every one of you an opportunity to say hello. We're going to start with Emily Russo.
Hi, Tony. Thanks for having me tonight.
Thank you.
Excited to be here.
Thank you
Uh,
so much. All right, we're going to go to Miss Chantel Jackson.
Hi, Tony. Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you. And Carissa Worthy.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
All right, we're going to get right into it. And we're going to ask our audience to please feel free to ask the ladies questions. They are educators. They're not just educators. Well, you'll find out more about who they are and what they're doing and the exceptional work that they've done in this conversation. So we're just going to start with, ladies, please tell us about your journey in becoming an educator. And we're going to start with Carissa.
I started my journey. I think this is my 16th year in education. I started out, I have a dual certification in general and special education. So that's where I started out teaching elementary level, first, second, and third grade. I then moved into just teaching third and fourth grade when I moved to the Atlanta area. And from there, I wanted to make a move after my 10th year, which I primarily taught math. So that's my love. So then I became a math instructional coach. I did that for 4 years. And for the last 2 years, I have moved into the role of an assessment program specialist in Fulton County. And so basically, I just support two zones within the district with anything that has to do with assessments and data.
And I'm going to, might embarrass her just a little bit. Carissa is my niece. And I also want to share that she started out as a very young child teaching her younger cousins in a classroom setting. And she had a strict policy of making sure that her students, her cousins,
So
paid attention.
I've had my certificate for the 16 years, but yes, I've been teaching much longer.
And she's done a great job with teaching her cousins. And so she's still doing that as well when she can help her cousins. And so we're going to now go to Emily.
okay. My name's Emily Russo, and I started out in education actually by accident. I was in between careers, and my aunt worked in a school district, and I had an English degree, and they needed a para for the reading room. So I started working as a paraprofessional in that school. And I was working with this kid, I'll never forget him. I worked with him for so many weeks. trying to get him up at a grade level in the books that we were doing, and he just couldn't move. And something about mangoes and one of the books triggered him. And I saw that light switch moment of the kids just enjoying and understanding that learning was going to do something. And that books held something that they might not otherwise know about. And so anyhow, that started my journey. I then enrolled in a Master's of Education program at the University of New Haven, and I taught in Connecticut for 7 years, high school English in Bloomfield, Connecticut. And then I moved to upstate New York and couldn't find a job as an English teacher. But because of my previous career, which was in technology, I was able to become a technology coach for a BOCES, which is a cooperative in New York. So I serviced an entire an entire county, all the districts. So there were 9 districts in that county that I was part of helping to serve. There were 3 of us, and we were on a team called Model Schools. So that was technology integration that I got involved in. And then post-COVID, I decided to take a break. I was going to take a sabbatical, but instead I applied for one job and got it, working for a consultant agency on the West Coast in Portland, Oregon. And now I create materials for educators in the classroom to support learning. And that's what I do now.
Thank you so much. Chantel?
Okay, so I kind of similar to Emily, where I kind of tripped into education. My husband and I were both military at the time, and we were deciding to come back to Georgia. That needed a job, and my sister worked in an alternative school, and they needed a paraprofessional. We had 2 6th-grade students. I told the principal, if I can get these 2 6th-grade students past the CRCT at the time, if they could pass their testing at the time, then he would have to promise to get me a teaching job the following year. And the following year, we went to another school, and that principal needed a special education teacher. And I knew absolutely nothing about special education, but he said, well, would you want to do moderate or severe and profound? And I was like, first you have to define those, and then I can tell you what I want to do. So when he finally defined them, I told him, I was like, let's go middle of the road. And I fell in love there. And that's 17 years ago now, I think.
Wow.
Tony and I met in Atlanta when I moved to Atlanta area. I've now in the Augusta area. I've held a couple of positions, all grade levels, P12. And I've done program specialist. And post-COVID, I decided to return to the classroom. So I am now in elementary school, back in self-contained functional academics.
All right. Thank you, ladies, so much. All right. So now we're hoping that we're going to get some questions from our audience, and I just want to make sure that the audience knows you can put your questions in YouTube chat, or you can put it in Mukana. So our next question is, okay, while I'm waiting for questions to come in, I'm just going to say, again, thank you, ladies, for being here with me tonight. And I just wanted to share with you that this conversation was intended to be had in 2024. However, this time last year, I was actually in the hospital. And I was in the hospital from January 2nd until January 18th. And then I went to a rehab facility from January 18th to February 8th. So I was out of commission for a while. And I actually was told that I wasn't going to be able to walk again. And so I proved them wrong. So I was in the hospital bed at my home until pretty much the end of August and the beginning of September. And Carissa was also one of those ones that came by to see about me and make sure that I was okay. So Post-pandemic, now what, ladies? And we're going to start with Emily.
I'm so sorry. I laughed a little because been out of it and been vicariously watching my friends go through it. All of the people who remain in education. I talk to Erin quite frequently about it, but from what I do now, I do a lot of research about what's effective, what's not effective, and what teachers are facing, what students are facing right now. And one of the interesting things that I found in the research is like post pandemic, we were very, oh my gosh, the learning loss, we're so far behind. The kids will never recover. These kids aren't acting right. Like they don't know how to be at school. And within the last year, that's kind of started to calm a little bit down. There's still some issues as far as I could tell from outside the classroom. But, you know, the learning loss wasn't, depending on the grade level and the student that experienced it, it's not, the gaps aren't as huge as first anticipated and the scaries that followed after the pandemic. But there are still, I think one of the big things is that it brought out even more focus or spotlighting on the discrepancy in education between funding, between being able to support and maintain those technology levels in schools that don't have access to the funds or the well, basically the funds, but the funds are being able to retain teachers or things like that. Teacher burnout is still really real. And so, you know, trying to get the teachers who are the good ones to stay and offering optional solutions to, you know, getting those kids, you know, to close those achievement gaps and to keep the kids learning is really important. And still is very necessary. But I think some of the initial, like, oh my goodness, we're never going to recover from this, has kind of tampered a little bit. And I think so. What's next is we keep doing what works and we have to stop throwing technology at the problem, which as a technology person, someone who trains people in technology, as someone who writes for ed tech companies now, I get it, but I really don't feel that, you know, oh, Khan Academy is going to save the world. Like Khanmigo is great. Like AI and things like that. I think it's all about how it's implemented. I think we need to do more efficacy research into like how students interacting with screens or in small groups, like how are we going to get this hybrid situation to, or a hybrid solution rather, that will encompass all of those things and keep the good and get rid of the just filler stuff that came out post pandemic. So I think that answers your question.
Thank you.
To my ability.
Chantel?
I think I kind of agree with Emily quite a bit, especially about the whole figuring out which part of the technology to keep and which parts to kind of lay down and say that's enough of that. That's enough screen time. However, I still see that there's a huge gap when you're talking about rural areas because I work in a rural county. So the biggest gap is not the financial part or the funding. They have the funding, they have one-to-one devices, they have the what do you call those things? Hotspots. But if I don't have a tower within 15 miles of me, what am I pinging off of? So
Mhm.
they're still at a shortage. So those students are the ones who we are seeing that the gap is larger. So we're having to double down in order to try to close that gap. Same thing with the that I see in the younger students. That's where that behavior gap is larger because there were no Carissa's at home teaching them how to be students. They were being taught by the screen for a couple hours a day, whatever hours their teacher office hours were supposed to be or instructional hours were supposed to be, if it worked, if it, you know, stayed online. And then if that wasn't the case, then there was a bust out with packets of work with nobody there to help you go through it. because
Wow.
what we run into the problem of is the deficit that we see in our students. Our parents have the similar deficit, which is part of the reason why I left the administrative side and went back into the classroom.
Okay. Okay.
I hope that
Carissa?
answered.
Thank you. Thank you. Carissa?
Those gaps, as both ladies have said already. We definitely in the beginning saw some big gaps. It's not as much now. And with me being in assessment and constantly looking at data and looking at it across the district, it definitely is moving, at least for Fulton County, it's definitely moving in the right directions. I think we have put some programs and things in place across our district to help kind of close those gaps. The other thing I would say is teacher support. Teachers are coming in now and not equipped to handle students with such gaps. So just making sure that within your classroom, district, school buildings, that there are supports provided for those teachers so that they are able to help kind of close some of the gaps that the students have.
Thank you, ladies. I appreciate that. I want to talk a little bit more about the technology deserts in terms of rural areas and even in some cities. I had an occasion to actually, and this may be a little political, to work with a family member, and they are, what I would say is a medium-sized city in Georgia, and in this city there are, I'll just say, like AT&T has 5 gigs up and down in this city, and also there's a cable operator in the same city that is giving the residents the bare minimum, and they have a lock on that particular area, and the families in this particular area are not able to move to another provider. And so it's a complex issue, I understand, but in situations like that where there is, in certain communities in the same city that have diverse technology experience, what are some of the things that you can suggest to parents that may be in a situation like that? Anybody?
The library. I would
Library. Okay.
definitely suggest public libraries. I know we've go back to reading books. If the technology is not working, books are still being produced, books are still being printed, they're still in production. Sometimes we have to just kind of water it down and be okay that we don't have a screen in front of our kids and go back to the bare bones of it, and then reach out to try to, of course, continue to try to get that support you need, continue to try to jump through those necessary hoops so that you can get access. But in the meantime, don't miss out. Because all you do if you do nothing is create a larger gap. In order for those parents, we as parents, we can be upset about the political part of it or the access to it. Even as educators, we can feel that way. But if there's nothing we can do from our seat but complain, then how are we helping our babies if we don't do something to fill that gap, to give them some type of foundation?
Okay. Anybody else?
I was just gonna add to that, like libraries, 100%. They usually have better connectivity than the average household anyway, and most of them, not all of them. But the other thing too is there are programs that are out there to help communities advocate for connecting the unconnected. I cannot remember for the life of me the one that work specifically for school districts to help them get their area to have more reliable firewall internet. But it is a grassroots movement in the sense of like, if your community can't, or, like you were explaining, almost like a monopoly on the system by the cable company and the one provider, it feels like there's not a lot you can do, but that's the grassroots movement that you'd have to advocate for and hope that eventually it'll be fixed. But in the meantime, you still have children at home that you're trying to connect to the resources that other kids readily have available for them. And that's not, not fair. So sometimes hotspots can be sponsored by schools, by libraries, and by, you can purchase your own for like I think ours is a $10 plan. Like it's minimal, but if you have that direct connect, so like in a mid-sized city, you should be able to connect a hotspot from a different provider. But yeah, it's a tough one because, some of the things that have come out of COVID is funding for things like fiber being provided to rural areas. So like the county I live in North Carolina, will almost have like 99% fiber connectivity for every household, every family, everybody in the area. But whether or not you can afford to tap into that is different. So looking to services where you can help supplement that. And when I lived in New York, the cable company helped. They had funds for families with children actively in school that were like $10 a month also, or, based on a sliding scale, as opposed to like charging you the full $150 a month access. That's unreasonable for a lot of people and working families. But just looking for those opportunities within the community, whether it's through programs like that or the programs that are trying to connect people either in rural places or urban places or in the middle that just either can't afford to be connected to good, reliable service or don't have a good, reliable service, and get in touch with those companies. Like, look it up. I'm sorry, I don't have it off the top of my head. I cannot remember what the name of that company was.
Okay. Is that it?
I was just going to add, I know reaching out to schools, especially like in our area, during the pandemic, we had families that were having issues, so hotspots were provided. So reach out to your schools to see if they can provide you with some support. And I know also within the school buildings, they may have some type of program where parents can come in and have access to internet and other things that they may need to help support their students.
Okay. And this kind of brings up something else for me. 40 plus years ago, when I first graduated from college, I worked 2 years as a long-term supply teacher. And one of the things that I experienced, because I was in an inner city school in the middle of a project community, and we had to provide um, not just supplies, but clean clothes, lotion, soap, toothbrushes, things that, should have been taken care of at home, but this was the reality of this particular community. And I want to ask, because I've been away from the classroom now almost 12 years since the last time I was in the classroom. So I'm just curious, do you see that there is still the need for educators to go the extra mile and provide? I'm sure that some of you are continuing to spend extra money for, pens and pencils and stuff like that. But are you having to do those other kind of things that I mentioned as far as clothes? And so anybody can just share. Chantel, you were shaking your head first, and then we'll go to Emily and then Carissa.
Okay. Yes, I know currently we have our guidance counselor heads up programs we have a lovely community that supports our school system or our school out, and it's like 3 schools in our little area from elementary to high school. And our community and churches in the area supports are just great, from providing sneakers for the students. Like, they came over right before the holidays, and kids did I can't remember what the program is called, but they provided sneakers for every student who signed up. The guidance counselor knows a lot more in detail about what families are in the highest need. So she and her team helps to create a list, and the church provided over $1,000 worth of sneakers for students from P to fifth grade. We have a coat closet, food pantry. We also do a book bag, a backpack program. The backpack program, that's what it's called. So on Fridays, students go home with backpacks with enough food for the weekend for however many, people. If it's 4 students, each one of those 4 students get a backpack. So it's enough to share in the house to make enough food for the household for the weekend. Same thing with coats, socks. Yeah, we do it all. And the big need that I see, for me, there is a huge gap between those who have and those who need. Those people in the middle just kind of benefit from it, but there's a huge gap in the area where I am, of those who they have everything they need, and then those who have very little of those needs being met. And it goes down to parents even coming into the school and asking for, thankfully, our parents will come in if we feed them, and ask for support, and receive what we're providing for them. Even like study material, when we were talking about technology, we do a make and take kind of situation where parents can take study, like flashcards, home and study with their kids. Just that kind of thing. And we're trying to do it more often. It was kind of initiated last year, but this year we're doing it like quarterly, to actually let the school be an asset for those programs, because we want the community to support us. We have to support our community.
Thank you. Emily?
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to what Chantel said, because those are the programs we provided at the school that I worked at in Connecticut. But we also had family and consumer sciences facts class, and those teachers allowed the students to wash. We were a public school, but they had uniforms. So they were able to wash their uniforms and borrow a uniform for the day if, they didn't have access at home, or mom was behind, or they were behind. They were high schoolers, so it was a little more on them to do some of those things. But we still participated in a backpack program providing food. And that food came from multiple sources. So it came from like local food pantries. It came from the teachers donating what else was needed, especially during holidays or special times where like the kids were going to be out longer, and like they've had enough macaroni and cheese and they just wanted a little something different. And so the teachers would kind of band together and go to Costco and buy something a little more tasty, or like a package of brownie mix or something, just something to make it a little more special for them. Here in North Carolina, we definitely are experiencing the big gaps that Chantel was talking about, and providing those resources. It falls on the teachers a lot, and it falls on the community, and people step up. But it always fascinates me that we have money for, when like we were shut down for COVID, everybody got free lunch, everybody got free breakfast. You could come pick it up, no problem. It was paid for. And then as soon as it was over, it was like, oh, we don't have the money for that. And it's like, yeah, but you don't even have to provide it for everybody. If you don't like, can we just provide it for those most in need so that they don't have to worry about that? And, suddenly the money's just not there anymore. So again, teachers end up picking up the slack. I used to provide all sorts of supplies for teenagers in my classroom, but they could just come and take, whether it was personal hygiene or even like things like chapstick and, just the things that the kids needed that they lose or whatever. And I never asked. I was just like, there's a closet over there. If you need it, go take it. And that came from friends and family and my own, purse, to pay for those things. But I was single, and I was just like, I'll just help the kids out. But it can be a really big burden on the educator, because we're already staying after school, doing those extra tasks, to be a community. And I don't think, for all the flack sometimes teachers get and like, oh, you get your summers off. Blah, blah. It's like, yeah, but during the school year, I was there till 8 o'clock every night. And I was there at 6 a.m. And like, I was supporting, the kids, for their sports teams or enrolling in college or, whatever it was like, you're just on that whole time. And I don't think people realize the spectrum of what a teacher provides from their classroom towards that child's whole well-being.
Yes, it's definitely not a 9 to 5. Carissa.
I think they've covered most of everything that I was going to say when I was in the building. We did have those programs where they would provide food for the kids for the weekend or for long breaks. They would provide them with some food. We had the washer machine and the dryer within the last school building that I was in for if there was a case of an emergency, a student need their clothes cleaned. Yeah, I think most of the things that they've said, and I know as a teacher, I've spent plenty of money providing supplies and other things for my students just to make sure that they have what they needed to be successful.
Thank you, ladies. We have a question from Dr. Chris Clark, Tempe, Arizona. Do you have any good stories about school secretary or janitors or other non-classroom teachers who made an important difference for the adults and students in the building? And we're going to start with Carissa.
I don't know if I have a story per se. I know you want to befriend them because they definitely will look out for you. If you do, like I said, I don't have a story, but I just know those are people in the building that you want to make sure you check on them, see how they are doing, give them a nice Christmas gift because they will definitely look out for you and get you what you need.
Okay, both ladies were shaking their head as you were talking, Carissa. We're going to go to Chantel first and then Emily.
I'm kind of like Carissa. I don't know if I have a story, but I do have I guess a situation where it's our administrative secretary, which is, if you see her, she's like a little small little ball of fire, but it moves the whole building. She will remove the whole building from the bottom up for you and for those students. But just like we come through, and Carissa was saying, we need to know our those people in our building. I always say you need to know the janitor, the custodial staff, the lunchroom staff, and the school secretary. And if the bookkeeper is a good person to keep on in your pocket too. So, because we just said we're spending our own money. They will at least assist and try to make it a little less than spending all of your money. They'll buy a pen while you buy two, at least. But our school, our administrator, our administrative secretary to our principal, students will stop by her desk just because they're having a bad day. And if she sees a student stop doing something that's inappropriate, she will pull the student in and make them write an apology letter to whoever they had.
Wow.
One day I walked in and it was a teacher that this student was very, very rude to. And this student he is not capable of writing full sentences at this point because he's a 5-year-old. However, she had him to state full sentences, and by the time he was done, he had a full little letter to his teacher for whatever he had done, an apology, with an apology and I thank you so much for what you do to me. So I think she made it all like work together kind of situation.
Okay. Emily?
Yeah, definitely befriend those people. I think on top of those personnel, like your pairs are also really helpful and will get you out of really big binds. But I think the secretary story I have is when I became a teacher in my first classroom. There was nothing in it. I was actually not even in a classroom. I was on a cart. So I had to go teaching high school in between classes, had to swim upstream to different classrooms on this little cart. And the school secretary she pulled me into this room and she was like, any of the stuff in this room you could take. And it was like a projector. And because she knew I was techie. So I had like my laptop and I was like, oh, with a projector, I could project my lessons and it doesn't matter what room I'm in and I can move really quick and not have to worry about having to write all the objectives on the board and whatever. And she just was like able to like show me like where there were things, and she would always remind me of important things that needed to happen, whether it was, you know, PDs that were coming up, we always remembered in faculty meetings, but like filling out certain paperwork or making sure you put in your request for next year at a certain time and all this kind of stuff. And so she kept me in line. All the new teachers, she had a list, a little roster, and like she was fire on wheels too. She wouldn't let us get away with anything. She wouldn't let the kids get away with anything, which was great. Because if you were having that moment as a new teacher where you're just kind of like intimidated, especially by high school kids, they're just like, so like, I don't care. So in your face, and you're just like, I don't know what. She'd be like, oh, come now. And she'd take them down and be the parent that I couldn't really cross that line with the students in the classroom, as far as like, it's not necessarily discipline, but more of like that come to Jesus moment of like, you know, you're not supposed to be acting like this. You're like, why are you giving this lady a hard time? And she would, you know, bring them away and bring them back. So definitely befriending all of those people. They will have your back in all sorts of situations. And the janitor or the custodian ended up getting me a one of those special keys that opened every door, because I was doing after school programs and I was there all the time. And a couple of times I got locked out of areas of the school and I like couldn't get back, couldn't get my car keys. I was like, okay, now what? Like, fortunately I only lived like a mile away and I was just get a cab to go home. But like, it was just like, well, what am I going to do? I locked everything. So he got me a key and I was set for the rest of the 7 years that I was there. The magic
Fantastic.
key.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Clark, for that question, and thank you, ladies, for your responses. We have a question from Noonan, Georgia, from Kimberly Mobley. Pause. Yeah. So the question is, what do you think can be done to increase parent engagement while understanding the many different struggles the parent are oftentimes experiencing? And we'll start with Carissa, since this is her aunt speaking.
Parent engagement. Whew. I know when I was in the building, some things that we would have parent night, where parents could come out, kind of like Chantel said earlier, get a sit and get or make and take, as a way to get our parents to come out and get engaged. I would say for teachers, constant communication. A lot of them are using Class Dojo now as a way of communicating. And I would say with the communication, not just communicating what's going wrong, but what's going well as well, because that will, you know, encourage the parents to pick up the phone when you call or respond to you when you're emailing them. It's as another way to get them engaged. And I would just say whatever. I would say for specific subjects, I know we would have our reading night, we would have our math night. We would come up with all different kinds of ways to kind of get them in the building to actually see what's going on. And I think once parents feel more comfortable, they will be more willing to come out and engage with the teachers and the people in their buildings.
Thank you. Emily.
I think, you know, Carissa had it really tight when she said the communication is key. At the high school level, it was more difficult to get engagement from the parents in the sense of, you know, like they just wanted to know their kids were doing what they needed to do. And otherwise they didn't really want to hear from you, which is a huge generalization, because what I learned in the classroom is like, that I had to be more aware that not everybody's situation was the same. Obviously, you think that that's a given, but you walk out of, you know, your education program and you're ready to go teach and you did student teaching And you might have done it in one type of school where there was high parent engagement and it was easy. And then you go into another school where that community trust had been broken, whether it was from the administration or years of just letting it slide or not providing things. When I got to the high school that I was teaching at, happened to be the high school I graduated from, and they didn't even do pep rallies anymore. Like the football games, they had football games, but there were no more pep rallies because the kids couldn't be trusted, is what they said, administration at the time. And so, advocating for those community things, the football coaches along with a group of teachers and alumni got together and were like, no, we're having pep rallies again. There's got to be a pep rally for at least homecoming and at least this. And we had a cookout and we had music and we had the big football game. But the main point was to have the teachers there interacting with the community and showing that, like, not only do we show up for your kids in the classroom, like we show up for you and we're here to talk and and have a good time. Or if you want to ask me how your kid's doing, that's fine too. Like, let's just, and you have to rebuild trust with the community. And in my experience, that was our biggest hurdle, was rebuilding that trust, that we weren't there to just pass their kids through, and that we understood that it wasn't easy for them. Teenagers are not easy. They are, they'll tell you 3 ways to Sunday how they're not going to listen. And they're grown and they don't have to tell you anything anymore. But, helping the parents see, like, this, our guidance counselor and our school psychologist did programs for for educator. I keep saying the wrong thing, for parents who wanted to be educated and like maybe some parenting skills to work with one of their kids that was difficult. And, those seemed to do pretty well in building some of that trust back. And the community did start to come out more and support more of the things that we were doing. But I think it all starts with communication.
Okay, Chantel.
Okay, so ironically, this is what we've been planning for for the last few weeks or few weeks. Parent Academy. We started parent nights. We had a couple parent nights, but now we're parent academies, trying to start Parent Academy. I'm claiming Parent Academy. And basically what Parent Academy is supposed to come out to do, our purpose is to do exactly what you do. The question is engage our parents and in activities along with their students. Like even sitting down and playing board games with your kids. But the board games are structured or towards whatever they're learning. So it may be a reading comprehension board game or something like that. It may be a math facts board game. But to get back to the I say the kitchen table learning. So you get back to the conversations, because what we're learning is with the increase of the technology and the lack of interaction with one another, not only are students struggling with communication and conversations amongst themselves and with their teachers, but I think parents are having the same thing at home, which in turn behaviors increase. And then we're at school having to deal with the behaviors. And now we're not only calling parents for we're only calling parents for the negative things versus calling them for the positive more often. And I really love that Carissa said that we call our parents for the positives. I encourage the team that I lead to, first thing in the beginning of the year, call your parents with something positive from day one. If it's nothing but, oh my God, your child has a beautiful name, whatever it is, just say something positive to start the year off, because the first conversation you have with your parent, you don't want it to be one of those conversations of little Johnny's doing this or little, Sarah's doing that. And now every time they see the school number pop up, they're hitting decline. Because I don't want to deal with those issues. You have them from 7 to 3. They're your problem. And or I'm at work, I can't talk to you, or whatever. If it's something positive, they won't be so nervous to pick up the phone and wondering how to respond to what comes at the other end of the phone call. Or text message even, because I use text messages a lot for my kids.
Thank you, ladies. I appreciate it. Thank you, Kimberly Mobley, for that question. Dr. Clark is back. All 3 of our panelists have used the word community as an important part of their account of life in the classroom. How have how have you experienced the pluses and the minuses of a school community relationship? And we're going to start with Emily.
So I think I kind of alluded to it a little bit before, but like when I got to the school that I first started teaching at, the first 2 years were really, really difficult because the administrator did not have a relationship with the community. There was a lot of these kids type attitudes instead of our kids. And they were focused on uniform problems and on like, oh, the kids aren't following the dress code and they're not, they're walking the halls and they're not going to class on time and stuff like that. And it was like, can we just focus on, making this an experience that kids want to come to? Like if we're going to constantly drop things on the students, like, these rule and now we're going to do this and you're not allowed to do these things anymore and lunch is only inside and you can't go out in the common area anymore and you can't do this and you can't do that because you don't know how to act right. That was constant refrain they heard, and the parents started to hold on to that as like, well, that school doesn't really care about my kids anyway. So following those 2 years, I had 4.5 amazing years with an administrator who came in, and his goal was to become like the go-to person of the community. And so he expected out of us to be part of the community and to reach out to the community. And so I taught high school English when I was there, and mostly freshmen and juniors. And I found programs for my students within the community or got the community to fund those programs, and then held like exhibitions in community spaces. So like the library or the town hall or things like that, so that more of the community could see it because they weren't allowed to come into the school building most of the time. And those kind of programs started to build trust. And it wasn't just me. There was a cohort of us that were being supported by this administrator, the principal, to find ways to engage the community, to show the positives of what our kids were doing, and to kind of reverse some of those stereotypes about our school or judgments that the community had about the teachers in the school or how we were, participating. So I think like overall, the big thing is, I think your school should be your community. I think it should be someplace like, even if you have to go 180 days or whatever it is a year, that you want to go there. It's not just a place to see your friends. Like there are other things that are of value that you're going to get out of it, whether it's how to apply for schools or how to play sports the way you want to play sports, or, learn things that you wouldn't have the opportunity to learn on your own. I think they start to see the value, the students see the value in it, the parents and the community see the value in it, and then they're more willing to invest in things for that community. When the school asks for something, they'll figure out a way to make it happen more readily than if you don't have that community bond being really, really strong.
Thank you. Chantel?
I think as far as community is concerned, we get the support from our community, but I think the positive is what the community can reduce the stress and the pull from the staff and the teachers, staff, and administration. Community can, if the community is the positive side of it, if the community is providing financial support for certain areas, the administration can allocate additional funds for something else. I think that kind of helps balance some of those things off. And I think the negative side of that could be, if we're putting it in, then what are we getting back in a sense of, can I come in the building and use the building for free and not follow the protocol of the district, of if your district rents your buildings out for whatever reasons. So those kind of scratch your back that are kind of under the table and not doing it the right way. So I think that could be a negative part of it. But I think we get more out of it, than more positives out of our community, being connected to the community, than we would get negatives out of it.
Carissa?
I agree with Chantel that we get that I have seen in the buildings that I have worked in more positive than negative. Going back to having a partnership with different people in the community. I know at one particular school we had a partnership with one of the local churches, and they would provide coats as Christmas gifts or toy as gifts for the students. We've also had different people in the community provide like teacher of the week, those type of, they would provide food, they would provide gifts, those types of things. So I have seen it on the end of more positive. And also I worked at Main Street Academy, which was a starter charter when I started there. So we were heavily working with the community because we did not have a lot within our building. We didn't have a lot of space, money, and all of those and resources. So the community helped us out a lot with like providing building space for us to go in to have art galleries and shows. Because we did a lot within the building, but we definitely needed that support being a starter charter school.
Thank you, ladies, so much. Thank you, Dr. Clark, for that question. I just want to add that in the past, for me, I understand very clearly that the school is, in most instances, the centerpiece for the community. And if you have a strong school and a strong house of worship, and if you're really blessed, you have a bank, a community bank that is also a part of the community, you have a great community and able to do a lot of different things. We have a question from Brooklyn, New York, from Mr. Mike Edwards. What do you all think of the future of education looks like? It is decentralized, less state or federally funded, and more community form of schooling. So we'll start with Carissa. What do you think?
Can you read that question one more time?
What do you think of all of the future education looks like? Is it decentralized, less state or federally funded, or more community form of schooling?
Oh, I guess that depends on our local leaders, for sure, of what it's going to look like. Hopefully we definitely have that community involved. We definitely need our local leaders involved. And I think a big thing with the local leaders is having local leaders in place who know about education, who can kind of help and assist with the best route for us moving forward.
Thank you. Chantel.
I will have to agree with Carissa there. I think it starts there. If our local leaders, whether it be within the community, because we all know that we have local leaders as far as our states and counties are concerned. But when you live in those smaller communities, you also have the people in the community who make all the decisions. Even those people, we need those smaller positions to be on board with increasing education and decreasing the gap, whether it's a financial gap or an academic gap, whether it's we need more volunteers gap, because we even have programs that come in and volunteer to do after school programs. So whatever the need is, I think it's going to always be important, whether it is decentralized, federally mandated or state mandated. Either way, the community is going to be still a pivotal part of that puzzle.
Thank you. Emily?
I was thinking about it like in the sense of that he was asking like what would it look like, and I think for pre-COVID to today, one of the big things that needs to change is the way that we do fund education, so it's more equitable across communities. In Connecticut, it was on your tax base for your community. So if you have multi-million-dollar homes in your neighborhoods and everybody's working, you're getting a much higher tax rate that goes into your education system than if you are working in, or if you're living in one of the more urban areas, which might have more people, but a lower tax rate because the corporations that own a lot of the property are not paying their fair share into the tax base. And so I think like kind of figuring out how we balance those federal funds, state funds, local funds to make equity more across the board for every district so that we don't have schools that are struggling to keep the lights on and make sure kids are fed and that's their priority over like the newest robotics program. When you're able to drive 5 miles down the road and one school district has amazing programs and the other one has the bare bones, that's not equitable. And I think in public education it needs to be equitable. I don't have a problem saying I'm nervous about the next 4 years. The new administration has made it well known that they want to defund and destroy the Department of Education. That could have a very devastating effect on public education. I don't always agree with what they do. I don't think most teachers, across the board will hands down agree with everything that's going on. But at the same time, there needs to be something so that when, I've moved 3 times in the last 5 years. If I had kids, that's 3 different school districts. They could be in learning at different levels. And like, how do you allow for, 4th graders in New York to know the same thing that 4th graders in North Carolina know? Within reason. So I think like, there has to be some sort of federal oversight in the sense of like, this is what we should be doing and here's your money. And then the state level can decide, okay, granularly, this is what we're going to do for that. And then locally, even more granularity. And I also think that giving teachers more autonomy in their classrooms to take that learning objective and be able to teach it the way that they think their students are going to be most receptive to it. So not prescriptive ways of teaching. That's not to say methods aren't necessary. There are certain methods that absolutely should be used. But like, if you have a classroom full of kids who are all obsessed with Roblox and nothing else, then like you can, change the content a little to make it fit or appeal to those kids, or support their passions or things that they're interested in. Some sort of cross hybrid of like the Montessori method or Waldorf, where kids get to guide the learning as opposed to being mandated the learning. So I think we need to find a balance there. And then the last point I guess I would make is that, homeschooling's gone way up since the pandemic hit. There's a lot more community schools that are people who are choosing to pull their kids out of public school and let someone else teach them. And I think that, some of them probably might be amazing. And a lot of them are not being regulated in any kind of way or overseen. Some states don't even require you to purchase a curriculum. Some states, when you go to purchase a curriculum, you can only purchase religious curriculums. There's no other options. And so it doesn't speak to the entirety of the people that want to do a community-based learning situation. But that said, I think, bringing community back to a more connected level would be really nice. Elders working with children, passing on knowledge, and especially when they're really young, and breaking down some of those barriers, whether they're volunteers or mentors in the community. I think we should be taking advantage of all that. So
thank you so much. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate that. We're down to our last question. You're speaking to the world. What do you want the world to know? I'm going to start with Carissa.
What do I want the world to know? I think as far as education, I do believe that we are moving in the right direction. Specifically, after the pandemic, I believe we are moving in the right direction. I think it is important, as we've said all night, to have community involved. Make sure that parents are involved, provide those supports that educators need so that it'll trickle down to our students.
Thank you. Emily?
I think, the world needs to know, or that we need to know, that public education is the leveling field for all of us. If we don't have public education, the gap between the haves and the have-nots is going to exponentially grow. And so it's very important to support your local public education. If you don't like what's going on, get involved, but also support the educators. Like they are, I have met like not a one what I would deem bad teacher. I probably have met some that are burned out, but not one that was bad and like willfully trying to hurt your child. So like instead of like calling out, maybe calling in those opportunities to become part of that community instead of judging that community and just writing it off as a waste of time or tax money for the curmudgeony old ones. So
Chantel.
I want the world to know. Yeah, I think I agree with Emily on this one. Public education is going to definitely lessen that gap. And I think we always have to remember that within that public education, there's a huge gamut of students that we have to include, from our special needs to our exceptionally intelligent students. Or gifted students. And I think we have to remember that educators are the foundation of that public school system. And if you support the educators and those who support us, then we can get all of those pieces of the puzzle to work together. The educator, the community, the funding, the equity, all of those pieces of the puzzle may work together to lessen that gap if we all just decide to jump on the same street at the same time.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you so much. Conversation with Tony Mobley is produced by valued audio visual professionals who meet daily in Office Hours Global, hosted by Alex Lindsay. Thank you, Mimo Live. We have conversations with real people. Stay tuned for new episodes and great conversations with Conversation with Tony Mobley. We ask that you look at the 100+ episodes of Conversation with Tony Mobley, and we ask that you rewatch this conversation. And if you like it, we ask on YouTube that you like and subscribe. When you have time, go ahead and look back at some of those past conversations. I'd like to thank everyone for hopefully you will find something that you like and hopefully is helpful. Thank you, ladies, for being a part of our conversation today and for doing the work you do and for being the person who you are. And again, we want to say Happy New Year. And next week, we will have an accessibilities panel. That's right. Next week, we're going to have an accessibilities panel. And the following week, we're going to have the men come back and talk about their views on education. We'll have educator men on in 2 weeks. But next week, accessibilities. We want you to stay tuned. Take care. God bless. See you soon. Good night.